Give me half a second. Yeah, perfect. Um, Good. Well, today we'll be focusing on what is SafeTag. Nothing too strange, nothing too complex, but on having a very good understanding of the framework. So we are starting the beginning. Um, what is SafeTag? Um, it stands for Security Auditing Framework and Evaluation Template for Advocacy Groups. And basically is a framework, or some called it a methodology, that adapts some techniques from ethical hacking and risk modeling, on threat modeling, and adapts them to be applicable and relevant to small organizations, especially non-profits, that might include, for instance, NGOs, human rights offenders, or small media outlets. And that in many countries, especially the countries we usually operate in, their models are less for profit, and they're more like pursuing a cause, or covering things that are usually not covered. Um, yeah, and this methodology is very focused on digital security. However, is extensible. You can add parts, and or it also considers some parts that are covering physical security, and is very compatible with other approaches that are more on the psychosocial side of things, or other aspects of security that can be also considered. Okay, and it relies a lot on the threat model of the organization. We're going to cover this a little bit deeper in a couple of slides, but yeah, the idea is to base all of the assessment in the needs of the organization and the actual risks that the organization is facing. And it's open to the community. SafeTag is a methodology, is a framework, is a resource that we can interact with in terms of proposing changes, or editing, updating content. We can do that because it's an open source resource. Yeah. That said, what is not SafeTech, that's also important. Sometimes, for instance, at the personal level, I receive from some founders requests like, do a SafeTech to this organization, or I want a SafeTech program for this group, and in the end, not always is the right intervention that we can conduct on these organizations. And one of the first myths or confusions around SafeTech is that it's not training. When we are doing SafeTech to an organization, we are not preparing a training program. That's very important. Also, SafeTech is not covering the implementation of security controls. Usually, what we want for the organizations is that they improve their security. However, SafeTech is only giving a diagnosis, okay? And I give you the list of things you need to solve as an organization, but it's not necessarily my responsibility to actually implement these changes. Uh, Another thing, SafeTech is not one solution for every organization. Every organization has their own context and their own needs, etc., and that should be reflected into a good assessment process. Each organization will have a different SafeTech process. We'll be talking about that later. And is not incident response or rapid response. Sometimes something bad happens, like an organization was hacked, the website, or a device was confiscated, or things like that. In that case, you can do SafeTag at that moment, but it's not supporting the incident. To see this in a more visual way, the way we pitch the digital security life cycle for an organization is something like this. You start doing an assessment. you have an organization or a media outlet, human rights defender organizations. You want to know how is their security. So you run a SAFETAG assessment. After you run the SAFETAG assessment, you will have a list of things that you can do in your organization to improve their security. So you enter in the recommendation implementation phase, and these might be trainings. We need to develop security policies or rules in the organization. We need to change processes or apply technical controls. I don't know, put a video CCTV or access control in the offices or something like that. That fits into this part. And then you let the organization have a normal operation, and at some point it might happen an emergency. And it happens. Website hacked or information leaked, or maybe some part of the staff left and they had the passwords of the social media accounts and they are basically posting things that they shouldn't, things like that. Examples, millions. And when this happens, we can start an incident response process. Okay, where we can address that specific emergency. And for instance, if we have problems because we lost the access to the social media accounts, we can try to get back this access to the right people and stuff like that. And after this incident response process, maybe you will take the organization to a different place where we can start again. So now that we had this emergency, we can conduct another assessment and start the process again. Also, there are people that start the process again before the emergency, like they don't feel they need to do the assessment and all that stuff before going back to normal operations. I'm admitting someone. Excellent. So yeah. This another way to see this is that SAFETAG tried to solve some problems in the community before it existed. One of the problems, the biggest problems, is that usually the digital security interventions in the community are supporting individuals. That said, some people try to organize trainings, and to this training I invite 100 people. Maybe I have 1 or 2 people per organization, and the advice that I'm sharing, the slides, the tools that I'm sharing are targeting only individuals. Okay, improve your passwords, improve use a VPN, stuff like that. But we were not supporting organizations as a whole. I'm talking about like 5 years ago, something like that. Now, fortunately, the model has moved to acknowledging better the organizations and try to work around the organizations. Another problem that when everything was a training, we had trainers doing the same thing over and over again with many kinds of audiences. So it reached out to a point where not all the information that was shared in those trainings or those interventions was useful for everybody. An example there, I used to work, I'm Venezuelan, and I was many years ago in a training with Colombians and Cubans, and there was a 3-day training, and the third day was something that didn't relate to the Cubans at all, to the point that the Cubans just walk out the room because they don't even interacted with those technologies. And it's kind of this problem that we have seen in the community, like people with the same slides going to every place to support everybody else. And here the moral of this story is that each audience, they have their own context, their own processes, and their own infrastructure. And that might require a different kind of training or a different kind of intervention. I'm not even introducing SAFETAG at this point. This is a community issues that we had in the past. Now, when SAFETAG arrives, then what SAFETAG wants to do differently? First, that conducting an assessment should be adapted to each organization we are supporting. And we should give importance to pertinent recommendations. What is a pertinent recommendation? Another example, we had an organization in Central America years ago where they were audited. They went through a process like this one, and the recommendation was to change their server to from a Linux server to a Windows server because it was better for the case, etc. It was super expensive for them, but well, they found the money. And once they found the server, they discover or they realized that they didn't know how to um, do the administration of this server. So a couple of years passed, and then given that nobody knew how to use this server, nobody used it, and nobody updated it. So 2 years later, it was worse. They had a server with a lot of sensitive information there that was outdated and was vulnerable because that recommendation wasn't well adapted to that organization. So that's one of the things that SafeTag is trying to solve. First, guide the assessment to the organization, but also recommending things that the organization can actually implement. Also, that is deeper. Usually, when we are talking about very basic assessments, we are telling people use VPN or use Tor or use a password manager. And sometimes in the organizations, the threats or are way worse than that, or way more complex than that. So with SafeTag, we have a space where we can explore deeper their processes and their technologies, so that we can propose more meaningful things that are adapted to the organization and more complex than just use a VPN. Very, very oriented to exploring organizational processes. I always try to divide it for, I don't know, 90% of the cases. These can be divided into when we are talking about non-profit organizations. There are organizations that are, for instance, gathering human rights violations documentation or complaints from victims in any number of different contexts: elections, gender-based violence, war zones, criminality, etc. And we have a second stream of work in civil society that is more like media outlets, for instance, their journalistic process. Okay, that might include having sources, that might include protecting those sources. Yes, so we are very interested while doing SafeTag into exploring those organizational processes. In that remaining 10% of cases, it will be other processes, and we will try to understand those cases before moving forward. Yes, I don't know if there are any questions so far. I'm still still have content to cover about SafeTag as a framework, but just in case, again, you can raise your hand, etc. No issues with that. You can even interrupt if you want to. Super. SafeTag as a framework, as I said before, SafeTag is a framework, and that means a lot of things. The first, exploring what a framework is or what a framework should be. In this case, a framework is first a reference, is something I use to judge if it can be applied to my case. Also, is adaptable to the specific problem. I will need to just probably take the parts that I will need to do my job. So that's also part of the framework in this context, of course, and also flexible. If something is not useful for my case, I don't take it. If this is useful, but I need to change it a little bit, to tweak it a little bit, I can do it as well. So that's the reason I always put this image. Like, I love the idea of comparing SafeTag to the Lego bucket, because SafeTag is that is a number of pieces, and you can build whatever you need from those pieces. And probably you won't use, for instance, I don't like, it's a lie, but I don't like orange color, then I don't use the orange color. Or I don't need green, I don't use green. Or I need to be in a specific shape, I can build this in with that specific shape. But now the question, given that we have that freedom, now the question is, how do I pick the pieces? No, how I know which pieces are useful for me, and this is a kind of a starting point for that. It will depend on the context. For instance, if an organization doesn't have a website, then maybe I don't need the pieces that are analyzing websites. As easy as that. Or maybe the opposite. Maybe an organization is very, very worried about their computers. So I can focus on the pieces that are dealing with assessing the computers. Also, the auditor skill set. We are going to talk about this a little bit later, but I consider myself, I came from the facilitation world. I started conducting trainings, and after that, I started to work on technical, more complex and technical things. So I feel more comfortable with interpersonal activities than with technical tools. I still can do it and I like it, but maybe I rely a little bit more on those pieces that are more in the facilitation side. And you can work as you see fit for your case in the same approach. Also resources, especially time. For me, that's a very important one. It's not the same to build a Lego piece in 30 seconds than in 2 days. Um, it would be a complete different outcome. The same happens here. If I have an audit that will take 2 days, I will try to make the best I can do with that little time, but I will probably prioritize the pieces here. And I will try to choose the ones that are more important for the organization. But if I have 1 week, I can pick more pieces of this framework, and that will also work perfectly. And also specific requirements and scope. Sometimes the organization will tell you, I need you to conduct an assessment on our site, but please focus on websites. Again, the example of websites, because many organizations, they are not clear on how to assess if they are secure enough in their websites, especially those organizations that they don't have IT staff or similar. So we have that. Then if again, I'm going back to some SafeTag principles here. As an auditing process, when we hear the word audit, some of us will be taken to a place where we are, for instance, approving or reproving something that we are auditing, or we are giving points to in this case to an organization or to a process. However, SafeTag doesn't work like that. Okay, these images here, when I assign a number to the result of the audit, or this approach where I said, you approved, is satisfactory this audit. This is not the way SafeTag works. Okay, and that's very important to know, especially I remember some funders that they wanted to conduct SafeTag audits to their grantees, and the approach was like, I need you to conduct SafeTag on them and tell me if they approve so I can give them my funds. And I was like, it doesn't work that way, because SafeTag won't tell you that they approved or not. SafeTag will tell you that they have some gaps in their security, and will be recommending things regarding those vulnerabilities or those problems we found. It doesn't matter if the organization is very big or very small, or if they are very mature in terms of security, or they are very new. And in any case, we should be able to propose things that will help them improve their security even more. Okay, that's important to know. And given that we are having this conversation, now the question: how those pieces look like? Enough of Legos. I want to see how I can apply this in my life. So the pieces are these two kind of pieces: methods and activities. You're going to see them. The methods are very general aspects of security. They cover broad areas, and they are not necessarily tied to digital security. Again, very broad areas of the operation of the organization. And then we have activities. The activities are the specific tasks that we can execute during the audit process that will let us know if there are vulnerabilities or problems that we can address. Okay, uh, ditching the Legos a little bit, um, it will look more like this. This is an actual method, the one in the white square, the organizational policy review. And this is not necessarily a digital security thing. It's more trying to explore if the organization has some kind of rules, like, you know what, if you enter the office, please put the lock in the door, or when you are going out, turn off all the computers, that kind of things. No, and that can be way more complex, but that's the broad and general aspect, is that method, organizational policy review. And under that method, we might execute four different activities. The examples there, in case you can see them for the size of the font: identifying informal agreements. Also, you can do a security policy review as a process, a standalone process. Do interviews with the staff, and an exercise that they call a day in the life. Um, these are our legal pieces. Like, if I'm interested in reviewing these organizational policies, then I'm interested into choosing at least one of these four activities. And yeah, these are the pieces that we are trying to include into our auditing process. Another thing that is interesting on SafeTag, what they call the tree approach, is that, as I teased a couple of minutes ago, maybe when I said I'm coming from the facilitation world, I started facilitating. I wasn't even working on digital security, but I was working on election monitoring. Um, and I came from there and then expanded. So maybe I feel more comfortable with some set of activities than others. And SafeTech acknowledged that. So they propose that every activity and every method that we cover in SafeTech might be focused on one of three aspects: the technical aspect, the research aspect, and the interpersonal aspect. Okay, in this case, if I'm a facilitator, or I feel more comfortable facilitating, maybe I will love to focus more on the interpersonal activities, and same with the other two. We have trained a lot of people with very good technical knowledge. They know Linux very well. They know how to run commands very well. They understand networks very well. So they probably start in the technical side and then start to cultivate the other two. Okay, and that's a good news that we can actually train and cultivate any of these areas. So don't feel overwhelmed from now. If I will repeat that a lot, but because SafeTech is really friendly in terms of it's giving you many options and you can just pick whatever works for you the best. So, however, I understand that having those that big number of options can also feel overwhelming. But from now, we can only take whatever we need. So, in a more practical way, where is SafeTag? So, if you want to check this framework, it's in safetag.org. And if you feel more open source coder, you can go to the GitHub repository of SafeTag. However, the new version of the website is very, very good to the point that I never had the need to go to the GitHub version. I will try, because my computer is a little bit slow today, to show you the website. It's here. If you go to safetag.org, you will see this. You will see more information about this intro information in a couple of articles and resources to getting started. And then you will be presented with the different methods that we dispose of. Like, for instance, the organizational policy review is here. The one I took the screenshot to put in the slide, and the same way that you will find more methods. And every time you click one of these methods, you will see more information about the respective area of security, some guiding questions to understand if this is the method I'm looking for, and you will find the actual activities tied to that method. These are the four activities I also included in the slide to give you a better idea. Great. So amazing, excellent. Any questions so far? Um, maybe I will start this attitude of I want to believe that if there are no questions so far, I can go on because it's understood. However, I can feel free to interrupt, to put questions in the chat, etc. Even if you didn't understand something I said, I can go back. Okay, great. Prerequisites for SafeTag. Now maybe I got your attention about using this methodology in your work. So we want to understand when is a good call to conduct a SafeTag intervention. I wanna again take a little step back and present you with a scenario. Imagine that you met the coordinator of a human rights organization. They are worried because something bad happened. Then you ask them what happened to see how we can help, and they will say, last week someone broke into our office, and that's a problem. And probably we will try to follow up on this and ask them, like, but they stole anything, for instance, or do some kind of harm to the installations, and will say that some external disk was stolen, and the suspicious part is that nothing else was stolen. Some people broke the office, looked, searched for this external hard drive, and they took the hard drive. And you start following up, like this disk was encrypted, or what information, there was sensitive information there. And usually this happens a lot. You ask them, it was encrypted, they will say, we don't know. Probably that means that it's not encrypted indeed. And when you ask them for the sensitive information, they say yes, it has sensitive information. For instance, a database of victims of war, or I don't know, victims of gender-based violence or stuff like that, or people that are being targeted by a repressive government. That also might happen. So they they will try to get you to a place, or how can you help us? And there, the next step is to first breathe and understand what are we responding to. When we are being introduced to the organization in an example like this one, we might respond to two different things. The first one is responding to the actual incident. Okay, then we can do a number of interventions, and these are two examples. Like incident response, we can start an incident response process. We can start to, for instance, see if we have backups of that information, and we can recover that information. We can try to see if there is a way we can recover the actual hard drive. We can monitor if this information is being leaked anywhere, or trying to understand who was the people like behind this incident. Or you can give more specific support in other aspects to the organization. For instance, you can go there and install a safe box, so they can store the other sensitive hard drives there, in case this incident repeats. We can do that, but that will be mostly responding to the incident. The other thing we can do is responding to the organization context. And there are a different battery of things we can conduct to address this. And a classic example is training, and the other classic example is audits, conducting audits. However, these are not responding necessarily to the fact that one hard drive was stolen. This is responding to one organization that probably can improve their policies on how they encrypt their sensitive information, or where they store sensitive physical supports. Okay? It's important to understand this difference so we can propose them the right approach. Usually what happens in an ideal world is a combination of things. Maybe we can tell the organization, I am helping you with the incident, or I will put you in contact with people that can help you with the incident. I don't know, maybe a helpline, maybe Access Now helpline. But at the same time, we can also try to do an assessment to the organization to see if there are other vulnerabilities that might be interesting to cover. Okay. Yes, and in this case, there are a menu of possibilities. You can conduct training, support, rapid or incident response, audits. These are the four examples in the previous slide. But you can also do some form of rapid assessments. You can have an organization champion. This is an kind of old concept at the date, where you train only one person in the organization, and they will be like the new digital security like ambassador, like responsible for the rest of the group. There are many debates about the effectiveness of this approach, but for now I just want you to see the possibilities. You can train a new group of trainers. You can have some form of fellowships or mentorships, etc. No, policy development, security support, all this can happen. The thing is to understand that an audit is one of many options or alternatives that we have here to support this organization. And now, how can we know that the audit is the right one? First, if the organization has interest in this process. Maybe they are interested because of the risk they are facing. They are operating in a very risky environment, or maybe they are worried about the size of the organization. It's too big, too small, etc. Or maybe the complexity. They are managing processes that are too delicate, then they believe that many things can go wrong. Technical debt, this is a very common one. Technical debt is basically when you have a website that you started 10 years ago and nobody has touched that website, and probably that website is outdated, and it may be vulnerable to security problems. So maybe it's easier to hack your website because it's a very old one or something like that. Same thing happens with other technologies. For instance, once in an audit, I had people with a phone central. In their offices, they had a server with a phones, managing phone extensions and stuff like that. And it was so old that was so difficult even to find the vulnerabilities of that system because it was ancient. So that's technical debt. Um, Also, the organization having the internal capacity to conduct an audit, that's time most than anything else. And if you have physical access to their offices, that's also amazing. That is also a very good sign. However, especially after the pandemic and all that stuff, we are trying to propose remote models. So yeah, it's possible to conduct an audit remotely, but having physical access to their offices in case the offices exist is a very good sign as well. And the right auditor, this is very, very important. For now, I will say that, for instance, if I was called to make an audit to a feminist organization, and even when I by that moment I had good experience, I had a lot of audits done so far, I didn't feel comfortable doing this because after talking a little bit more with this group, it was a feminist group that is in a general more radical like part of the spectrum in feminism. That is fine, it's just fine. However, it wasn't very my place as a man to conduct this audit for this organization, and that was even shared by the members of that organization. So we found another auditor because I wasn't the right auditor. Same with other things that also include technologies. Maybe the organization relies a lot in a technology I don't have a clue about, so probably I prefer to go to another auditor and offer the opportunity to another auditor that is more comfortable with those technologies. That's another example of how this might work. And diving a little bit deeper on the desirable skills of an auditor, ideally, in an ideal world, the auditor have some technical experience, as in IT experience, knows how to install a router, how to, I don't know, even basic things that are the most common ones when we are working with security in small organizations. Also having some training experience, and also information security experience that is not exactly the same thing that IT experience. Um, you can get this experience probably through trainings, reading, stuff like that. But if we at least know in the basics the things that we cover in trainings like VPNs or like secure password to factor authentication, how to secure a Windows computer, is how to secure a cell phone. It's things like that are very useful, at least as a starting point. Um, Super important being themselves, like a lot of this process seems challenging, but the also the good news is that we are in a community that is very inviting in terms of we are not like corporate people that are trying to show ourselves in suits and ties to an audit, but we are very open to just be more easygoing and try to focus more in the needs, in the actual task that we want to achieve, and also to listen. Okay, so being yourself is important. And another crucial one is not overreaching on your skills. If you are not comfortable with a specific kind of activity in SafeTag, you don't do it. And you tell the organization, look, I'm not covering this specific part, or I'm not assessing this specific server or this specific technology. That's valid on SafeTech, as long as it's clear for everybody. And also being an ally. you need to understand the cost of the organization. Another example there would be an environmental organization. My first environmental organization in terms of auditing came in a moment where I had zero experience on environmental activism. I understood zero of this, and they were clear of that. And we still moved forward. And then part of my goals was to understand their cause, understand why they're doing this, and being comfortable with them doing that, so they can be comfortable to having me in their offices and asking a lot of questions. We need to remember that when we are doing SafeTag, we are basically building a manual of how to harm the organization. We are trying to detect all their vulnerabilities, all their problems, and it's very important for us to for them to be comfortable with us during that process. If they don't feel we are an ally, probably they won't share that much about their problems with us, and that will actually affect the result of the assessment. So that's also important, and that's very tied to this other point of being able to earning the organization's trust. We need them to trust us so they can basically share with us all of the multiple problems or secrets or whatever other thing that might be useful for a security auditing process. So we have that. That said, there we see a lot of moving parts, and that means that there are many different audit styles. There are people that are on their computer running technical tools, and that works for them. Cool. There are other kinds of audits where they don't touch a computer and they solve everything with pen and paper. It's like talking with people, facilitating activities, mapping, brainstorming problems. It's like more relying on the interpersonal side of things. Relying a lot on facilitation and analyzing processes might cover a little bit of that. Asking everybody, what are you doing? How are you? I don't know. Another regular process that we assess is the online presence part of the organization. Like, how do you post things in social media? How many people had access to those accounts? Who approves what is published? All of that. So doing all of that, those questions will help us to understand how the processes work in the organization, and we can go from there even without touching a computer. And yeah, other people are very good at physical security, on and on. Okay, it will depend on how do you feel comfortable, but the really takeaway from this is that each audit will be different. Even the same person can do 10 audits, and the 10 audits probably will be a different thing, and each auditor has a different style. In the community, for instance, in Latin America, we are a small community of auditors, and especially some founders, they know the style of many of us, so they know when to call Carlos because I need the way he does things, or they can call the others because they need this other approach to auditing. That is also valid, and that happens. Super. And in terms of ethical considerations, do no harm. That's a very broad concept, and is used in very broad ways. But the way I try to sell it is this discourse of everything we do might have positive and negative impacts. So being aware of those positives and negative impacts is crucial to don't forget um, to care about the organization and the process. That said, if I'm in a place and I'm sharing some information, thinking what problems may arise, may emerge because of this information I'm sharing. When I'm talking with somebody on a phone call, it's like this is secure to do this. I'm putting anybody at risk. This communication might be monitored or something like that. Having all of the asking ourselves a lot of these things is useful to maybe get a better grasp of the do no harm thing, so we can in the end be more friendly in terms of security with the whole process. So sometimes I can share a story, but I won't tell you in which country this happened or which organization it was or which year this happened, because I want to protect also the identity of this organization. Same with people, etc. Also, code of conduct. SAFETAG has a code of conduct. You can check in that link. You will have these slides as PDFs later today or tomorrow, because it's later for most of you. Yeah, and you can also check code of conduct for other spaces that probably will be very well aligned with the one on SafeTech. And another ethical consideration is having confidentiality agreements with organizations. Again, I'm repeating, we are having the manual, the list of things a hacker or a repressive government might do to harm an organization. So that's a very sensitive information, and we need to be aligned with the organization that we are not using this information for anything else, but only to write a report and to give that to the organization, and nobody else will have, for instance, access to these vulnerabilities that we detected. Another thing interesting is rules of engagement. We sometimes organizations, they are not that clear of how an audit will look like, and it's important for us to before we start to tell them, like, this audit process have this, I don't know, 6 activities, and we explain to them the activities, and they are clear of what they are doing, or what we'll be doing and what we need from them. Yeah, and the other thing, operational security. This is very tied to the first point that I had that I described, but I will just dive into operational security for a bit. Again, we can say do no harm. Please consider the communication aspect. Please consider the physical traces and travel logistics, and the information, but from the perspective of what happened with your information and what happened to their information. I can go even further, like to describe a little bit better, I'll talk more about operational security. The best way we found in the team, this was not done by me, so I'm not taking credit for this approach, but a good way to see this is that we have this person and we start to explore different aspects of what you are seeing on the screen. The first thing is that this person is operating a computer, so we need to start asking things about the computer. This computer is encrypted. There is integrity on that information. There is a password to unlock the screen. What sensitive data is here, and so on. We need to start understanding the security aspects of every component of all of this context. For instance, somebody can see from behind. This is a very important thing, especially for public spaces. Then we also have a mobile device. Same questions. There might be some variations, but start to asking ourselves what is happening with this device. Then communications. We are assuming that this person is talking with somebody else, probably in a video conference or maybe with the phone while they looked at the computer. But who knows this, what information that we are managing, we are making public. Sometimes organizations are working on less public projects or less public activities. Are we sharing about those in the air on communications? What can be heard, etc. Always you will have a physical environment. Who can hear? Are there cameras? And a very recurrent thing in Latin America, for instance, is that if you are auditing very at-risk organizations, Sometimes their directors are in a very high risk, and they are, in some cases, they might be victims of monitoring. They might have people surveilling them, and then this person, the directors of these organizations are telling you like, let's go to have lunch, like I don't know, as an attention because of you being there with them for a week or something like that. Then you need to ask yourself, like, I am at risk because they will see me with this person that it might be potentially surveilled, or the other way around, maybe we can put them at risk because of the activities we do. So all of those questions are also interesting to be considered. And the attitude, this is very very important. Kind of circling back to the um, being an ally and earning their trust, etc. Being respectful, being cautious, the do no harm again, humility. We it's very important that we accept ourselves a little bit more as facilitators than auditors, because we are there to listen to the organization, to their problems, to their fears. So it could affect the security of the whole audit if we are there and we have an attitude of imposing. No, 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 what's happening is this thing, not what you're saying. Or that confrontational attitude is counterproductive for an audit process. And the recommendation is always go there to listen, to understand them. I have a couple of stories that I will say for later modules, but the role that we play during an audit is very 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 important. Um, that said, as a kind of a closing remark around the operational security, always ask yourself, where is the weakest link? Sometimes will be with them, sometimes will be with you, with something you do. Same thing that I already said. And being very clear that operational security is not only digital security. There are lots of emotional and physical and other aspects that might be also considered when conducting these processes. I will do another stop here just to drink water for 3 seconds to see if you have any questions or anything you want to share. Excellent. See, somebody's writing. Okay. No questions so far. Combine SafeTag with other methods if it's possible. The answer in general is yes. However, I would make the observation there that SafeTag is one assessment, a diagnosis framework. So you will need to be cautious if you are mixing it with another auditing framework. For instance, we had people that tried to mix this with ISO 27001, and it was kind of good. It worked. However, it didn't have added a lot of benefits. However, we have other people that mixed SafeTag with, for instance, the holistic approaches, and it was perfect. It was very very well employed, because incorporating the psychosocial, especially the psychosocial part for those organizations that were supported at that opportunity, was very good. So yeah, part of the flexibility is that you can mix SafeTech with other methods. Does SafeTech need tech and coding skills? Only if you want to. And usually yes, usually we at some degree we are promoting or suggesting the use of some technical tools. However, you don't need to code. That's a very important clarification there. No programming, no coding as is required. However, we encourage the use of a couple of technical tools that are a little bit more advanced that the everyday use that we do with computers. So, however, I introduced this concept, but I can expand a little bit on it. There are people that they don't touch technical tools to conduct a successful audit. It will depend on your preferences. So if you, for instance, are more afraid or that you less comfortable with technical tools, it's okay. It's okay. You might start doing SAFETAG audits without touching those so much. And then you can try to explore to get to know them better and stuff like that. But it's very flexible and really friendly to start with. We'll be covering all of this stuff. And indeed, this gap that we have of 2 weeks will be focusing on technical tools, so we can have all the time we need to get to know these tools. Maybe we can say, I hate this tool, I don't like it, I don't feel comfortable with this one, but this other one is easy enough, etc. So that's another thing. Yeah, super. So moving to the next part, the structure, how the structure of SafeTag audits work. Um, how to organize activities. I get the legal thing and I choose my pieces, or I want to choose my pieces. How can I structure that process? The first answer is any way we need. There are not wrong or right answers, but it will depend a lot on the needs that we have or the things we want to do. Okay, and we'll make a stop. If SafeTech is also assessing other aspects of policy safety, as it means that we need also an auditor who understands about other aspects such as physical and psychosocial. How if we don't have them? That's a very, very good question. Basically, there are many ways you can approach this. First one, there are people that they operate in teams and they have like 2 or 3 people, and together they run the audits, and maybe one of them is more comfortable with the psychosocial and or physical part. That's one way to do it. Also, I have seen people that they are only one person conducting a SafeTag audit, and they do it from the psychosocial and physical side of things, and they don't rely a lot on the physical security side of things. So that's another option. A third option that it seems more that happens for a lot of people is that if you have some skills on each one of them, you can cover those as far as you feel comfortable covering. Yeah, so that's another way to see it. I have 3 options there. Maybe none of them is perfect, but there are different approaches for that. So yeah, and that will impact as well the structure of the audit, because if I'm caring a lot more about the psychosocial part or the physical part, then there will be specific moments of the audit process that I can apply those activities, I can conduct those activities. So one way to do this is to see the audit as these 3 phases. Easy, because it's basically pre-audit, audit, post-audit. It's very easy to get from there. And I will go a step further, and I will say that the audit process, the core audit, imagine you are visiting this organization, and when you are there, you have initial activities, core activities, and maybe more advanced technical activities. An important clarification here. A lot of things that I'm showing you, and I will show you later, There are my vision on how SafeTag should be done. It's not necessarily something every single auditor will tell you how it's done. Okay, I'm not saying that I invented this. Is very intuitive, and many people apply this. However, my point here is that there are many ways you can approach structuring an audit. For instance, there are many ways of selecting choosing the activities. There are many ways to do all of that, and this approach is one of the many approaches that you can follow to to do these activities. So that's another important thing. That's one of the blessings and curses of SafeTag being so flexible and so open. No, that you can solve these problems in different ways. So yeah, don't worry if you forget about this image, because I will show it a lot of times, because this will be our progress bar. Every time we have a session or any activity, I will tell you in which part of this map are we located. So don't worry about forgetting this. And yeah, so I want to focus on the audit preparation part today. Being our first session, one of the first activities that we can follow is first selecting the organization or onboarding the organization, depending on your case. And once you know this organization, you start gathering information about them. Usually, this is done remotely. Okay, usually I am in my home, like internet, and then I start to research the organization. I want to understand the context they are operating in, their public image, and basic sensitive information that is public. This is optional, however, it's very useful in many cases. For instance, we had cases of media outlets, small media outlets, that they operate anonymously. So they are not, there is no supposed to be public the identity of the people posting things on that website. And one of the first things I want to do is to know if I can, from my computer, get the identity of any of these people. That is a very good use case of having this research conducted. Could be very beneficial in the audit process. The organization's public image is also good to research, because especially this is useful for organizations operating in repressive governments, under repressive governments or countries, because um, usually you have an organization that has a very okay cause. I don't know. An example for Venezuela, we had a lot of organizations working health, okay, working fight against cancer, or things like that, AIDS or something similar. And you might think that that's a very good cause and they shouldn't be having any problems at the public level. However, when you research them, then you have entire campaigns, smear campaigns for these organizations, discrediting them. And the source of it is because they are exposing some problems in the health system in the country, and then the same government, the government itself, is not pleased because for that, and they are targeting this organization even when they are covering a very noble cause. So that's another an example. Millions of examples can be shared about this. Yeah, and when we did all of this investigation, this research, then we go to interviews, or first interviews. Before starting formally the audit, we want to talk to people there in the organization to understand better how they see the organization. We are covering this next. And once I have the research and I have the interviews, I have a better picture of how the organization is structured and their technologies, etc. Then I can start selecting activities, or this, yeah, there I can start. And once I have a pool of activities, I can have an agreement with the organization. So everybody's aligned that what will be happening next. For the remote information gathering, you will have these two activities. Okay. Again, you will have this content available as a PDF. You can check, but these are kind of the main pieces of information you want to gather from each one of those. One is the context, then you are covering the criminalization of the activity and other things, some legal problems that they may have, etc. And then you have the technical context research, where you want to understand better if which technical attacks has been happening in that country or that for that sector, including, I don't know, website takedowns or blockings or device confiscations rates for devices and so on. I want to briefly regional context research. Let me, the technical one, technical context research. Here in the SAFETAG website, I can go to activities, and I will do Control F, and I will put context research, and I will look to the technical one, technical context research, to see this activity. Again, remember that tree approach. SafeTech believes that this research is more requires more of a research profile and a technical profile, because this is test research in the computer and so on. You will see a lot of interesting information here, and then you'll have a lot of inputs on what to look for, and some places, even links to places where you can actually research these things. So yeah, for you to have an idea, it is very extensive, but it's good because you can take the moment you are comfortable with what you have, you can just round up the research and move on to the next activity. That there shouldn't be a problem with that. But you won't be worried about not having enough information to work, because SafeTag is huge. So yeah, these are the main ideas. A summary of all of that long activity you just saw. And some useful sources for researching these organizations and countries, etc., are these on the screen from the same organization and what they tell you. The news are very important, and also there are some international organizations and reports that can be used to research the context. Freedom of the Net is a very good one if available in your country. Transparency International, I really like that one because it talks a lot about corruption and public influence over the public sphere. So you may have a kind of a better idea of maybe authoritarian trends in the country, things like that. Or maybe that's another thing. Maybe you live in the same country and you already know most of this information, so you can, I won't say skip, but I will say like dedicate less time to this, because a lot of this understanding is already with you by the time you are doing this, you are covering this activity. Then you will have pre-audit interviews. You will try to meet with management, with IT, at least one person from each, like a very introductory interviews. These three are the three activities that are related to that. And the main things you want to know from this process are these things. You want to understand their needs. If they are looking for an audit, there should be a reason for that. They might be worried because they feel, I don't know, the office is not very well protected, because that happened to us a couple of times. The organized crime, or maybe in repressive countries, some actors openly said that they wanted to harm this organization, so they want to be prepared for when that happens, or they are receiving death threats. Thousands of things might be motivating them to having this auditing process. Also, you want to understand their infrastructure, which kind of computers they operate, the cell phones the organization is giving the people cell phones, or they use their own personal devices, etc. One story with this is that I was in a team conducting an audit, and someone, maybe it was me, but somebody forgot to ask the organization about the computers. And when we arrived there, everybody was using Mac computers, and we didn't have any clue of how to assess Mac computers at the time. The same with the same, I mean, quality of work that we had with Windows machines. So it was we had to reschedule a lot of things. For instance, the interviews that we do on site to check the devices, we pushed that a couple of days, so we could have a couple of days to research better how to harden and to check security configurations on Mac computers. Um, so if we, for that audit, we did this process more rigorously, the interviews, we would have asked this beforehand, and we will arrive to that. It was in a different country, so we will arrive this other country prepared on how to do this. So yeah, we want also to understand the whole infrastructure that includes many websites. Sorry that I talk about a lot about websites, but many organizations ask for this part, and we have many beneficiaries that they had 20 websites. So asking for all of them is important because we run tests for each one of them. So it's also a good question to ask them. Key processes, if they are working with victims, if they are working with sources, if they, for instance, in some countries, the key process is communicating with funders because receiving some kind of funds is criminalized in their countries. So that's another important thing. And one of my favorites, I mean, it's not a happy thing, but it's one of my favorites anyway because it's very useful, is asking everybody about their fears. Like, what do you think um, is what are you worrying about regarding the security of this organization? And you may have very surprising answers. Um, Most of them will be very balanced, very centered, very. I'm worried because in this country we are only 3 media outlets, and the other two were already closed or were already, or people they leaked their sources. So we believe we are the next ones. That's super useful information, for instance. Um, and so on. Some of them also would tell you, my fear is that, I don't know, the government is surveilling me through my TV. And maybe that's also very useful because maybe you will have a space to have a conversation with these people and to reassure them. Like, you know what, there might be many different ways that surveillance can be done. However, the one you are most worried about is very unlikely because A, B, and C, because the technology, that technology doesn't work like that, stuff like that. And also, it could be great to check the temperature of the whole group. We are talking about this more next week, but this is a good connection there. And yeah, what capacity they have, both technical and operative. If they have IT department, that's crucial. If they are ready and willing to implement changes that we can recommend them after the audit, how much access do we will have to their offices or to the people to talk with them, and if there is any urgency. No, maybe they just had a very bad problem and they want to conduct the assessment as quick as possible or something like that. In general, all of this information will be useful for us to understand what are we evaluating, what are we assessing. After all this process, we should know, okay, it's the computers, it's 3 websites, is 2 servers and 1 security camera server in the place, and the process of gathering I don't know, human rights violations in the context of elections or protests or something like that. That's the kind of basic information we will need to select the rest of the activities. Here I will let you explore the slides or explore the activity because it's very long. This list is really long of many different things we can ask or talk about with the people in the organization. And there I put some bullet points of the really important things that we can forget about 200 questions in that activity, but we will try to not forget about those in the other list. How big is the organization? How they are organized internally? How many departments, areas, if that's the case? What are the projects they conduct? Usually you will have that information is public, but sometimes it's good to make the question because maybe they are working on things that are not public. They may be anonymous, or they may be under another network or something like that, and it's good to have that information. The technologies they use, please ask if they are using Mac computers. That's important. Public and not so public incidents, if they suffer of any problems in terms of security. And keep in mind, in some organizations they don't share that publicly, so that's the reason we ask them directly. Their key processes, and well, it will depend on all the cases. Where we can conduct these interviews, if I live where they live, they may be in person, why not? And if the risk is not too big and we want to, cool. If not, it can be a video call, it can be on WhatsApp, Signal, it can be text based. It doesn't have to be a call even. The way you feel more comfortable. But the only thing here would be not conducting them by phone or by SMS, because there are some insecure communication channels. When I say phone, I say it's phone calls, traditional phone calls. So yeah, great. We did the interviews, we did the research, we did all of this. Then some tips, regarding the activity selection, the process. Well, ask yourself, what infrastructure do they have? Which processes should we assess? Which people in the organization are critical to not forget interviewing them or taking a look at them. What is more probably, we will find problems. If they tell you in the interview, we had a phone central that nobody knows about, maybe you will find problems there. And which assets, processes are being targeted by adversaries. Maybe they will tell you, here we have organized crime and they hate us because we are documenting about the victims of their atrocities. And maybe you know that those databases, those files, or those communications might be targeted by adversaries in that example. So some tips here. Please always include a threat modeling component. That would help you understand better the real risks, because people in the organizations, they tend to over focus on specific threats and specific problems they might have. Usually they struggle to see the bigger picture. So having threat modeling activities or components will be good. If you are asking yourself, like, what is a threat modeling component? Don't worry, because that's what we're going to cover in the next session, starting the next session. But it's important to consider this. Also, a data assessment activity. We want to understand where is the information, which channels they are using. They are receiving victim information through phone calls. You want to know that because that might be a vulnerability, etc. Um, Including interviews is a good tip as well during the audits, not to IT and management before the audit, but during the audit to everybody, if they are not too much. There are, I always, in all of these trainings, I talk a lot about an audit, an infamous audit that I did, where the organization ended up being having more than 62 people. That's a lot for SAFETAG standards. It might be done, but it's a lot, especially if they don't tell you with time. And having to interview 62 people in 3 days, it was a lot. So sometimes you need to prioritize and say, you know what, I cannot interview 62 people, but I can interview 20, maybe. And I can select these 20 people in a way that is useful, maybe the most critical people to be included. And also, we can choose one or two people from other departments so I can have a better picture of the whole organization. Uh, Also, we can try to include technical activities. That's a good tip. However, we can do this only if we can do that fluently. If we have insecurities about doing a very technical analysis, assessment, etc., it's better to tell that to the organization and telling them, you know what, we are taking out of the scope of this audit, I don't know, the analysis of this server or the analysis of this very complicated application that you develop for your organization. That is valid as long as the organization is clear of that and that works for them. If they tell you, you know what, the only reason we are doing this audit is for you, for somebody to assess this complicated application, maybe we need to go back to the drawing table and to ask ourselves if we are the right person to do this. Maybe we can do this in coordination with somebody else that knows better that technology. That might be done. But here the recommendation is try to include technical activities, but if you won't be able to do that fluently, don't propose it. That's it. It's better to not assess something than to do it bad. Yeah, because we will tell probably the organization that everything is fine, and they will believe us. And maybe we just overlooked something, and they might be suffering for that later, and they will hate us a lot because we tell them that everything was fine. And yeah, in general, whatever activity you are choosing, the priority is to get relevant information. Okay, vulnerabilities, and from those vulnerabilities, you want to formulate some recommendations. Okay, yeah. The last component here I have is the agreement with the organization. Basically, this is very different depending on your style and your context. For some, this is a legal protection. However, in my personal experience, is in my region, for instance, is a little bit less of that because people are not very comfortable involving law enforcement here, no, like using an agreement as a legal protection. However, organizations in Latin America usually like to have an agreement because it describes what is going to be happening. The scope description. This audit will cover the computers, the website, the Wi-Fi networks, and these other two things. For instance, critical processes and other, you name it. And organizations like that level of clarity more than for it being a legal protection. Expectation alignment. I spent almost an hour talking about what is SafeTag, what is not SafeTag, why is that training and not SafeTag, whatever other thing. And the reason for that is that for many people it's confusing to understand what is SafeTag. And that includes our beneficiaries, the organizations. So it's very important to have a space with them so they are clear that it's not a training, that is not this other kind of intervention, it's not incident response. And that place could be disagreement. Like when we wrap up the interviews, we know what we are going to do. We tell them, you know what? This is what's happening in the during the audit. Let me know if that makes sense to you, whatever. Important, which activities will be conducted, what do we need from the organization to do that, and what will be the products of this audit. What will happen? What will the organization get as tangible from this engagement? And also, some people like to also include the emergency handling aspects. They want to know, we want the organizations to know if it's possible that I break something during the audit, and what happens if I break something during the audit. A couple of funny stories as well around that, but maybe I'll save that for other sessions. Um, and also, for some, it's very important and a confidentiality agreement. Again, like for a third or fourth time, we are having very sensitive information about the organization. So it's very, very important that we are protecting that information very well. For instance, I like to say there in the agreement, or it could be an email, it could be very informal, but I like to give to have in writing that I'm not sharing the report of the audit with anybody else but the organization, not even the funder, if it's possible for me, or I'm sharing with the funder a redacted version of that. So I'm not including a lot of very sensitive things there, because funders, they can also be victims of leaks of problems. So that information can be leaked in many different ways. So given that that information is so important, a confidentiality agreement could be nice to have with the organization. I will again try, if my computer left, let me do it. I had a document. It's very old. I will try to update it for this training to share that with you. Um, I'm waiting for this thing to open. This was an agreement I built in 2016. This is taking forever. But now I'm going here. I will share this with you so you can have it as a reference, but please don't use that same agreement, because I see trillions of things I don't do anymore, like I stopped doing in terms of the actual activities. But in general, I like the idea of explaining briefly what is SAFETAG, okay? Some premises of SAFETAG. For instance, it's very good to say here, we are not compromising of implementing the recommendations. That's your thing. Maybe we can do some easy things during the audit process, but we don't have obligation. We are not obligated to do so. I explained them that I have these three phases: the pre-audit, audit, and post-audit. For this project, you can sign an agreement that will be based on this same document if you want to, but let me know. And the final report will be shared only between the auditor and the organization. Under no circumstances another actor can have access to this information. And then I started describing activity per activity what I'm going to do. No? So I say I will do some technical interviews. That is this. I will ask about A, B, and C. But what I want you to see is that for each activity, I added a section here that what are the resources I need from the organization. So these people are clear of what I'm looking, what I would need from them. As easy as that. Then management interviews. This is what I will do, and this is what I need from you. So also the organization is warned that for this time I'm there in your office, I will need availability for meetings with the people responsible for everything. These are the pre-audit activities, but yeah, many activities, I will say what I need from you and nothing. Like, don't worry about me. You won't even notice I'm there in your office. And so on. But for instance, a threat assessment activity, this is what will happen, and I need from you the possibility of having a meeting in a workgroup format with up to 8 organization members with managerial level. I don't do this. I don't do this exactly like this anymore. This number for me will be higher and whatever, but we can talk about that on each activity. That's the reason I want to reward this document and share with you. I would share this with you, but I want to share another document, another version of this that is updated. Yeah, excellent. So I would say that right now we are here. No, we are covering the audit preparation. I believe we finished the in theory, like we finished the audit preparation side with all of the research and covering the interviews. And also we talk about what is SAFETAG in a very detailed way. So I hope you are more aware or more clear of what is this. If not, I'm happy to say all of this again or cover any specific part that wasn't very clear or something I forgot to cover. So here is where we are, and for the next session on Tuesday, I will be covering the initial audit activities, or what I propose to you could be the initial audit activities. Yeah, that's all the material I have prepared for today. I don't know if you have any questions. Yeah, I know it's kind of late as well, sorry, but if you have any questions, this is a good time to talk about those. We'll drink more water. Okay, I'm starting to see people typing, so well, I will drink more water. Okay, maybe that was an error or something, but cool. I will, I don't know, give like 1 more minute in case you have any other questions. But for now, I know today's session was a kind of packed in terms of concepts and stuff like that. I promise it will be funnier next time, where we are more into the weeds with activities. Um, but yeah, I will be sharing the video. I will be sharing the slides, and I'll be sharing this agreement, this document that you already saw. Probably would be a Google Drive for now. And in the meantime, I will try um, to talk with the team and organize a way to have another platform for next time in case we can improve the sound, especially. So yeah, we are seeing each other on Tuesday at the same time. No, don't worry. I recorded it on my end, but I recorded it in a way to only capture the sound and the screen that I was sharing. So no problem with that. So yeah, we'll see you next Tuesday. So have a good evening and rest well, and see you on these days. I'm happy to let you out some minutes before time. Excuse the accent, but yeah. Let us know through Jean, Nan, and Ashraf if you have any suggestions for next time. And perfect. See you around.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Carlos. See you next week, everyone. Bye.
Bye.